a country that ranks near the bottom of the developed world for charitable giving and near the top for volunteering. That is the paradox at the heart of South Korea's civic culture. In the most recent Charities Aid Foundation World Giving Index, Korea placed in the lower third of surveyed nations when it came to donating money. Yet survey after survey shows Korean adults volunteering their time at rates that rival some of the most civic-minded democracies in Europe. The same person who will not write a check to a charity may spend their Saturday sorting donated goods at a community center. Why does one of the world's wealthiest nations give so little of its money and so much of its time? The Beautiful Foundation, Korea's leading charitable research organization, estimated in its Giving Korea report that individual donations amount to roughly 0.5% of GDP, compared to 2.1% in the United States and around 1.3% in the United Kingdom. That gap compounds on a per capita basis. The average Korean donates a fraction of what citizens in comparable OECD economies give each year. Yet Statistics Korea's social survey found that approximately 16% of Korean adults volunteered at least once in the previous year, a participation rate that places Korea above the OECD median for formal volunteering. High school students face a specific structural pressure. The university admission system formally requires documented community service hours, and most students log at least 30 hours before graduation. The gap between giving time and giving money is consistent, measurable, and has persisted across 3 decades of economic growth. 3 forces built this gap. The first is Confucian reciprocity. In Korea's traditional moral framework, generosity flowed toward people you knew, family, neighbors, the community you could see and touch, not anonymous institutions you could not verify. The second force is institutional distrust. Korea's nonprofit sector has been shaken by a series of high-profile mismanagement scandals, and surveys consistently show that fewer than 4 in 10 Koreans believe donated money reliably reaches its intended recipients. When trust is low, people prefer giving in forms they can observe. A volunteer can see the soup kitchen, the elderly neighbor, the community garden. The third force is structural. Korea's university admission system, one of the most competitive on earth, rewards documented volunteer hours, creating a generation of habitual volunteers who carried the practice into adulthood. And beneath all of this runs an older current, the traditional mutual aid system known as Duri, in which village communities pooled labor rather than money. Modern Korean volunteering is that same instinct, routed through 21st century institutions. The consequence is what researchers call a time-rich, cash-poor civil society. Korean nonprofits can mobilize hundreds of weekend volunteers for a community cleanup, but struggle to pay a full-time program coordinator year-round. Organizations that depend on donations for ongoing services, disability support groups, domestic violence shelters, rural elder care providers, operate with budgets that are thin even by regional standards. This pushes them toward dependence on government grants, which brings its own fragility. Funding priorities shift with every new administration, and organizations that challenge official policy risk losing their subsidy. The informal volunteer economy has other limits too. Volunteering without donating rarely funds the systemic advocacy work, legal reform, policy research, public campaigns that produces lasting structural change. Korea's welfare state has expanded significantly since the 1990s, partly to compensate for a civil society that cannot finance itself. That expansion is valuable, but it means the state, not independent organizations, holds the purse strings on social services. Korea's giving paradox is not uniquely Korean. A consistent pattern emerges across comparative research. When citizens distrust institutions, they tend to give time rather than money, and when institutions earn trust, money follows. Japan shows a similar dynamic, as do many post-Soviet societies in Eastern Europe, where informal mutual aid remained strong, while formal philanthropy stayed weak. The lesson is not that volunteering is inferior to donating. Both are genuine acts of civic care, and hours of labor have real economic value. The lesson is that institutional trust is the hinge. Societies that want a fully funded civil society need to build the trust that makes monetary giving feel safe. For Korea, that means stronger nonprofit transparency requirements, independent auditing, and a track record that convinces ordinary donors their money will not be misused. The volunteer culture is already there, deeply embedded, structurally reinforced, and cross-generational. The question is whether Korean institutions can earn the money to go with it.